Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jedi Way here on the Outlaw Nation channel. I am John Rocha Fett, here hanging out again with my co-host Laura Kelly out there. Laura, you are a number one contender in the Star Wars belt now in the Schmodown. Is there a level of prestige that you're achieving now as you come onto the set for the Jedi Way? Are there rose petals being thrown? What's the whole preparation for you now when you co-host a show?
Well, it's a lot of all of it's in my writer, and people really just need to read every detail and make sure that there are only green M&Ms here because the green M&M is the hottest one. And there needs to be confetti thrown everywhere. So I just feel like I'm being celebrated all the time. It's a whole thing,
If we start showing up with five other people who look like Laura Kelly behind you, kind of like Queen Abdallah, then I'll know you've made it for sure. That's the next step for you, I think. But anyway, sure. Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us here or watching the show here. We're going to get into, as you can tell by the thumbnail, and hopefully you've seen the title of the show as well. We're going to have a fun conversation about droids in the Star Wars universe. And this comes to us because there was an article on StarWars.com breaking down the top 20 droids in the Star Wars universe. I texted Laura, this could be fun to talk about. She's like 1,000% on board. So we're going to jump into it and talk about that and just go back and forth talking about our favorite droids. And hopefully we touch on some of your favorite droids and some of the lesser known droids that maybe some of you love as well. And if we don't, let us know, then let us know in the comments section. Laura, talk to me about droids. What is your feeling about the Star Wars droids as you've become such a lover of this franchise and the fandom?
Well, it's interesting because the first characters that we ever see in Star Wars A New Hope are C-3PO and R2. So they're our introduction as the audience to Star Wars, and we kind of watch the entire beginning of the film through their eyes. Mm-hmm. So it's we kind of jump right in with the droids. I think that that image of the sort of early concept of C-3PO where he's like a more feminine looking gold droid that Ralph McQuarrie drew is it's one of those pieces of art, like Star Wars art, that just sticks in my head. It's just such an iconic thing. And so what he brings to this entire franchise, I think is a huge deal. But he's actually not on my top favorite droids.
Wow.
I'll be interested to hear if he's on yours. But really, at the end of the day, it's really not Star Wars unless there is a totally awesome droid that you just want to root for. That's the energy that they bring to these films and even to the books and to the TV show. They're constantly stealing scenes. And yeah, you can kind of get into the really big picture of things of well, man created droids or robots in their image and God created man. So there's a whole sequence analogy there that of what, droids are meant to represent, not only in Star Wars, but in all media. Yeah. So it's, we kind of think of them as they're the cute kind of comic relief, and they are, but there's sort of a bigger picture there, that we can or cannot tackle, totally up to you. But they're the backbone of the galaxy. They're doing all the dangerous, tedious jobs that the other sentient the biological beings don't want to do. So there's definitely a spectrum of droids in the Star Wars universe that, going from the non-sentient to the very sentient, and they definitely keep it interesting from project to project.
You're absolutely right about that. The progression of droids from when they're first introduced, and you're right, it's C-3PO, R2-D2, which of course is a reference to Hidden Fortress, the Kurosawa film. For those of you who are maybe discovering Star Wars for the first time, discovering our show, maybe haven't done a lot of research about your fandom into Star Wars, Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress, that is essentially C-3PO and R2-D2. No, they're not two droids. They're two assistants to the princess, and that's what he based R2-D2, George Lucas did, and C-3PO on those two actors and those two characters from that classic Akira Kurosawa film. So you talk about the creative, the connective tissue of God creating man creating droids. It all leads back up and down the chain for sure. And to see how droids have changed so much and in their importance and in their villainy as we've gone along, Laura, has been such a great thing to enjoy. You could argue about Ewoks You can argue about Babu Frick. You can argue about these other characters that are thrown into the Star Wars universe to essentially possibly sell toys or whatever. But droids are seamless. Droids absolutely function in this world and logically fit into any place you put them in, whether they're helping Luke in the back to tank, or they're cutting or shooting stuff up with the Mandalorian in a Western style showdown, or they've got the piece of the map to find Luke. There's all kinds of things that droids do that are essential to the world of Star Wars, and a lot of these missions wouldn't be completed without the help of droids. They are kind of a sounding board. They're almost at times, not always, but sometimes they are the pets of the biological people we see in Star Wars, and and a droid that they can, like Luke and R2D2 have these great conversations that you would have with a friend and also maybe with a pet. So it's fun to see the different ways the droids fly and fit into the universe that we have.
Exactly. And I love that, that Kurosawa comparison of the two peasants are really supposed to sort of, they're the inspiration for 3PO and R2. It's great energy that they bring to these first movies, especially given that they're the first droids that, we see.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
I think when it comes to the sentience of droids, that's kind of a fun place to sort of start, because you've got super sentient droids that are very expressive and can be very emotional, like droids like BB-8, astromechs or protocol droids. And then you kind of have you've got the B1s in the prequels that are meant to just be there to be blown up. That is the only purpose that they serve. And there's not a lot of, I guess there's a little bit of sentience there, but they're basically just cannon fodder. So, but I'd like to kind of think of IG-11 from The Mandalorian. He's kind of somewhere in the middle.
Oh yeah.
He kind of acts like he's not a living thing, or he is a living thing. He can be taught. We see that he's sort of reprogrammed and retrained for a whole new occupation. And then in the end, he's trying to convince Din Djarin, I'm not a real thing. I've never been a living thing. So off with the helmet, all good.
Yeah.
And so he kind of straddles that line, I think, a little bit in a interesting way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And we're going to talk about some of our favorite droids now. We're going to go back and forth throughout the episode and just kind of highlight some of our favorite ones, whether they be good or bad or somewhere in the middle, as Laura just pointed out with IG-11. Certainly there's a lot to explore in the world of droids, for sure. All right, where do you want to start, Laura? What's one that jumps out at you right off the bat?
Well, I cannot talk about droids ever, literally ever, without bringing up L337.
Yeah.
Because she is my favorite droid in all of Star Wars. And it's not just because she's played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, although that is a huge part of it. I love the energy and the sort of social justice that she brings to a Star Wars film. It's just, it's so incredibly exciting for me. I love this droid. I love the fact that she, spends a lot of the movie standing up for the rights of her own kind. She's constantly fighting for droid rights, and she's, expressing a lot of her own free will and free agency, much more so than we've probably ever seen in another droid. Maybe K2 is kind of along those same lines too. But I want nothing more than to have more L3 in Star Wars. And I'm kind of hoping that Lando show is a prequel to Solo, and maybe she'll pop up in there.
That would be great to see. I 1,000% agree with you. She is the Laura Kelly of droids in the Star Wars universe. Absolutely. She's tall. She's got very strong opinions about how the world should be, and she's willing to sacrifice herself to make it happen. And you got to come correct to L337, because she will call you out just like Laura Kelly will. So I absolutely totally understand why you love that droid so much. Revisiting Solo, which we did a few weeks ago for one of our episodes, Laura, was really a joy for me to kind of rediscover and fall back in love with L337 as a droid. And just like you, I appreciate the fact that she's got more to say. She's not just there in service of her owners or masters, whatever you want to call them. And we'll get into a philosophical discussion later if we want to about that. But she's not just in service of Lando. She is an equal with Lando. There is this whole subplot of the possibility of they may have hooked up at some point in some way in the past. And all I was thinking as I was getting ready for this show was how much I'd love to just see an L337 show. Can we ever have a show where the droid is the lead? not just part of the ensemble or not part of the cast, but actually the lead. And I think L337 is the first droid I would ever consider to watch a TV show about. See her prequel, her stories. What did she go through before Lando ever even shows up? I would love to see so much more because Phoebe Waller-Bridge did such an excellent job voicing L337, but also the writers of Solo and the movie itself really highlight a whole new way to look at a droid and all the things that she goes through. It forced you to reconfigure how you take on droids and how you think of droids. And that's certainly due to the construction of the droid and the movement of the droid, but also the incredible voiceover performance from Phoebe Waller-Bridge, for sure.
Exactly. And Phoebe, sorry, I was supposed to say Phoebe Waller-Bridge started as an astromech. No, L337 actually started as an astromech droid, yes. And she's self-made. She made herself into, kind of combined herself with a protocol droid, right, and made herself what she was when we met her in Solo. So she's an inspirational character. Unfortunately, she's got sort of a sad ending, or a tragic ending in a way where, it's almost like fridging in a way, just a little bit, just because, she basically has to die on Kessel so that Lando can mourn her, so that we have a reason to put Han in the cockpit of the Falcon. Yeah. So it's not my favorite use of a character that I really, really like. It's one of those things where I kind of have to balance that, but I'm mostly just grateful that she's in the movie at all. Yeah. And I've sort of heard the interpretation of her being uploaded to the Falcon as sort of taking away her free will and her agency. I didn't interpret it that way when I first saw the movie. I thought it was sort of cool and kind of poetic that she lives on in the Millennium Falcon, and this the most iconic ship in all of Star Wars. And there's a little bit of and from a certain point of view, Empire Strikes Back, we get a little bit of like what's going on with L3 and the Falcon during this time, and it's kind of cool. I enjoyed it, and she doesn't seem unhappy in there, like she's got a couple other droids to like hang out with and talk with. I don't know. It kind of didn't strike me that way, but I totally understand that interpretation of things as well.
Well, and another reason why maybe the Falcon survives for so long is because of L337's indomitable will to survive, to keep going, to keep fighting. Maybe that's an essential part of why the Millennium Falcon has endured. That old bucket of bolts has endured for so long, as it does into the new trilogy, or the most recent trilogy, for sure. Well, I will move over to K2SO. That droid was so incredible to experience in Rogue One for me, Laura, because I love Alan Tudyk. He's a voiceover god, honestly, in the community. But to see the way they constructed that droid is a scary, scary looking droid, and certainly pulled no punches from the beginning, right? He clotheslines Jyn Erso, and that is devastating. Anyone who's ever played sports or done anything and been clotheslined while you're running, it is a horrific experience. But right from the beginning, he is presented as this very strong, capable person, but once again treated like an equal by Cassian throughout their interactions. Even displays a bit of jealousy when Jyn Erso starts to be part of the group here, almost like not a love triangle, but certainly a friendship triangle going on here. And his shots, his barbs, his movement, throwing the bag down when Jyn Erso gives it to her as she walks off camera, all of those things, for me, really separated K2SO from some of the other droids we've seen in the past as we've watched Star Wars. The individuality, kind of akin to L337, this idea of these droids having their own personality, their own points of views, their own desires for things, him complaining that she gets a blaster and he doesn't. All those things really kind of brought K2SO to so much life. And just like L337, a bit of a more tragic ending at the end of Rogue One for him. But what a way to go out with such honor and nobility at the end. And I get emotional every time he passes away in the film, for sure. What do you think of K2SO?
I do too. I mean, the thing about Rogue One is that it's such a dark, kind of gritty, it's a war film, Yep. And K2 brings this element of humor, as dry as it is. And I think the fact that it is this like super dry, sarcastic humor, it really, really works for this sort of dark movie. But yeah, the concept of being a reprogrammed Imperial droid, where my assumption is that like Cassian is the one who reprogrammed him. Yeah. they clearly have like a very strong bond, to the point where when I've gone back and rewatched Rogue One, and I've rewatched it a lot because it's my favorite Star Wars film, um, it always kind of weirds me out a little bit, the beginning where you talked about K2 clotheslining Jin.
Yeah.
And it kind of weirds me out that Cassian's not on that mission with them, or
Right,
wherever Cassian
right.
is, because he's in the Ring of Catherine, that K2 isn't with him. It kind of seems
Yeah.
like they're inseparable for most of the movies, but we sort of see them on separate missions at the very beginning, which I kind of
Yeah.
thought was strange.
Yeah,
But he's
yeah.
such a great character. And yeah, you're right. His ending is so incredibly tragic, but the fact that we get him through almost all of the film, with his, no filter sense of humor and way of speaking is truly a privilege, I think. I love that character too.
Yeah, we've all traveled with somebody who complains the whole time, but then comes through at the end when you need him to. We've all had that interaction. What's the next one for you, Laura?
The next one on my list is Chopper, because I am nothing if not a Star Wars Rebels super fan. So I want to talk about C110P, aka Chopper, aka Spectre 3 of the Ghost Crew. Chopper's the best because I've heard Dave Filoni describe him like this, and I'm sure it was on like Rebels Recon or something back when the show was airing, that R2D2 is sort of the equivalent of like a dog in Star Wars, and that he's, easily lovable and loyal. Chopper is more like a cat, if you're gonna, hang around on that analogy. He's a little bit colder.
Yes.
Every once in a while you get that sort of heartwarming snuggle, but he's a little bit evil, which I sort of love. But the history of him is that he, a young Harrison Dula recovered him from the wreckage of a Y-Wing at some point, I think after the Clone Wars. But he also brings a lot of, this is going to be a common theme for me, he brings a lot of comic relief to Star Wars Rebels, because he has, that uncanny astromech ability to express things like frustration, insolence, pouting. And yeah, he's known to sigh every now and then. Like, you just know when he's frustrated because he can actually sigh, and it's really funny.
I thoroughly agree with you 1,000%. I mean, he's such an essential part of Rebels, and I've seen him described as the old man of the droids, and that's absolutely true. He's crusty, he's opinionated, he's gruff, and he has no problem killing somebody if that helps them complete the mission. I was so shocked to see a droid like that in an animated series that was that was on Disney XD for kids, essentially. To see that droid be a part of the crew, and then how that droid's presence, how Chopper's presence grew as the series went along, season to season, was such a joy to see. And then seeing him pop up, I think in Rogue One, if I'm not incorrect there, seeing him in the hangar was so great. Just for a quick moment, that was so fun to see a live action Chopper. And once again, we're picking these droids right off the bat that have an incredible amount of personality, their own, in essence, human feelings, their own feelings, administered during situations, administered during missions, administered during interactions. And it's a joy to see their own individuality coming through. And it's clear that Star Wars wanted to make that a point as they were going forward with these newer pieces of media, that the droids would have more of a presence, more of an almost equality with any of the human beings or any of the species that they were coming in contact with. And certainly Chopper is that in spades. And it's one of the reasons he frustrates you, but you also love him at the same time.
Exactly. I remember early episodes of Rebels where like him and Ezra are constantly at odds. I think Ezra's like riding around on him, trying to like pull his head off. And by the end of it, we've got Chopper holding Hera's hand in one of the last episodes of Star Wars Rebels. He just, he goes through, his own character arc over the course of 4 seasons. And it's really cool to see. But one of the best emotions I think that he's able to express, and he does express it without abandon, is jealousy.
Yes.
And, we talked about that with K2SO, but there's a really funny part of, I think it's like an early episode of Star Wars Rebels. It's probably season 1 or 2, where the Ghost Crew somehow end up with like an Imperial droid that they freed from some Imperial complex, and they bring him onto the Ghost, and they're kind of leaving the atmosphere of the planet. And they're like, this droid could come in handy. Like, he's pretty cool. Like he definitely helped us in this situation. So maybe we keep him around, make him part of the crew. And they're hanging around the open airlock, and Chopper he punts him out of the airlock so that this droid falls to his death on the surface of this planet while they're way up in the air. And it's just the epitome of Chopper's energy, and I love it. I love what he brought to the show. And yeah, he was definitely a great balance, I think, for the Ghost crew.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I want to jump into one of my favorite droids, which is a little more, not really personality, but certainly a droid to fear and the look of the droid. The probe droid has always been one of my favorite droids. It is the only droid aside from R2-D2 that I ever bought as a kid. And I remember just having that thing because of the look of it was just so badass. I remember being in the theater, seeing Empire Strikes Back, and seeing that thing come out of the snow on Hoth and just being blown away. Because we'd had the mind interrogation probe droid or whatever that thing is, that circle thing in A New Hope. But this kind of took it to the next level. The spider legs, the big red eyes, it, surveying the landscape, trying to find Luke. I thought it was pretty badass, and I just have always enjoyed that droid for what the kind of fear it instilled and the look of it, because it looked like it could take you and slice you into little pieces all on its own. So I thought it was pretty badass. What's your feeling about a probe droid? And any feeling at all, Laura?
Oh, sure. There are lots. The thing with the probe droid, I think, is it's just such a great example of the amazing puppetry that went into creating those early films in the 70s. I think it's Empire of Dreams or something like that, where you can actually see the behind the scenes of the puppeteer like beneath the surface of Hoth, and they have the like stick where they're pulling up the probe droid to poke its head out of the snow. And it's just it's so cool the way that they're able to bring all of these different skills to, something that looks really technologically advanced, but is, at the end of the day, a fairly simple setup. And I think it's a tribute to the sound designers too, because the sounds of the probe droids are just really cool to me. They're like kind of bubbly, but evil. Like it just works somehow. I love it.
Yeah, we wouldn't have Empire Strikes Back without the droids who find the Hoth, without the probe droid who finds Hoth, alerts Vader, and everything happens from there. Yes, and yes, they self-destruct when they're in combat, but it's because they've stored so much information. I guess they figure, hey, let's put this in the mechanism. You will never get this information. We're going to self-destruct. So I think that's not a negative overall. It's kind of a frustrating thing if you're trying to get the information a probe droid has accumulated, for sure. All right, where are we going next, Laura? What's the next up on your list?
So next up on my list is a little bit more of maybe an obscure reference. I want to talk about Mr. Bones, who is a droid character from the Aftermath trilogy by Chuck Wendig. The Aftermath books are some of the first Star Wars books I ever read in the new canon. And I know a lot of people sort of complain about the first book because the writing structure is a little bit strange. I promise they get better. But it was great because this is the first canon material that we had set after Return of the Jedi. And the thing about Mr. Bones is he's, again, bringing that sort of, this is also the theme, the like evil, chaotic energy to this book. And it's fun because he's a B1 battle droid, but he's painted red. And he's very sadistic and murderous. But he also likes to hum and sing and dance while he is engaging with his enemies. And I could not get enough of Mr. Bones in this trilogy. He's just amazing. He's teenage Snap Wexley's like companion, his personal bodyguard. When he speaks in the books, he speaks in all caps. Every line of his is in all caps, which is perfect. One of the best lines he has is, "Hello, I am enjoying this hug. Hug, hug, hug. A hug is like violence made of love." And that's the perfect sum up of who Mr. Bones is. Not as a person, as a droid. He's amazing.
He's almost a sociopathic droid, right? The fact that it's going to do what it's going to do, and it's certainly not going to affect it in any way, shape, or form. So much so that it's enjoying its life to start, and whatever's going on when it's humming or singing or whatever it's doing, to kind of just go along with it. Because this is just something that I have to do. it's not a big deal. And I'll even speak about so well, I'll even go a little bit, maybe I'll go a little bit softer, say it's like the anchor man of droids speaking the truth right now. We are laughing. It's that kind of droid, and it's kind of an interesting droid to have in the universe of Star Wars for sure. And you're right, it's such a badass design. It's got that like long blade for a hand that it can use, a spike. It's pretty intense looking droid, and the red color of it all changes it, because those droids can be really comical when we've seen them appear in the past. So to turn one into a badass, kind of like a droid we might get to if we don't run out of time, a C-3PO droid that is a vicious looking droid, that is a vicious droid. It's always cool to see the other side of it, for sure. I enjoy that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
He is blasted into shreds at one point by an Imperial officer, and he has the ability to like repair himself
Right.
miraculously. So he's really on like a totally different level than the B-1 battle droids that we know from the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah.
And I do kind of think of him as like everything Chopper really wanted to be, in that he's loyal, but he's evil.
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to jump into the IG side of things, the IG-11 and IG-88. I think those are, yes, they're two separate droids, but from the IG family. And certainly, you mentioned it earlier about IG-11, how he's a reprogrammed droid by the end of the first season of The Mandalorian, but initially part of the assassins that collect bounty across the galaxy. Sorry, and being so in love with IG-88 as I was growing up, because that is a droid that never got enough love and enough credit for the viciousness it could carry out in the world, and the way it could assassinate people. Like, I know there's a toy that came with all the different blades it has. It was just blown away about how scary IG-88 was. So when I saw IG-11 show up in The Mandalorian, I was losing my mind in that first season. And then seeing that shootout with Din Djarin and IG-11 going at it Western style, I thought was badass. And you felt sympathy for that droid. And then later on, even more sympathy, as it was a caretaker of Baby Yoda. And when he took care of those two stormtroopers, Holy Mary, Mother of God, what a way to get what he needs to get back and deliver it where he needs to deliver it. So just love the viciousness combined with the matriarchal instinct when it became a nurse droid at the end there.
Agreed. I love IG-88 and IG-11. I think the thing with IG-88 is that I really didn't fully appreciate that character much until I started reading the visual dictionary. I think like one of the visual dictionaries that talk about the original trilogy, it does mention that like he can see 360 degrees and can fire 360 degrees around his head. And I'm just like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. It's too bad we couldn't actually see that in Empire. He just kind of stands there.
Yeah, he does.
But then enter The Mandalorian, and we do get to see that shit in action, and it's amazing. I love that character, and the fact that they were able to bring him back at some point later in the season, because I was so disappointed when he was like just dead and gone, like in the first episode. I'm like, wait, you got Taika Waititi, and that's all you're gonna do with him? That's it? So I'm glad that they brought him back, and I loved, his arc throughout season 1 of The Mandalorian, especially the finale is incredibly moving. Yeah. It's crazy how they're able to pull that off with a machine. It's great.
Yep. It helps. It helps to have great actors voicing those lines from those machines, because they bring you into caring for these characters. All right, what's up next for on your list there, Laura?
Well, I've got R5D4 on my list, and he's another one that doesn't get enough love, I don't think. But from a certain point of view, for A New Hope, he got all of the love that he fully deserved. He had his own story called The Red One. It was written by Ray Carson. If you have picked up that book, but for whatever reason maybe skipped over that story or you don't remember it, it's totally worth revisiting, because it's an amazingly well-written story. I remember reading it and then learning that she was going to be writing the Rise of Skywalker novelization, and I was just so pumped. I was like, oh yeah, no, she's got this. It's going to be great. And basically the story of this droid of, Luke refers to him as Red. We see him, he's got his bad motivator, and that's kind of all we know about this droid. But it turns out he was living on that sandcrawler for 4 years, and nobody wanted to buy him. And all he wanted was to fulfill his programming and serve a new master who would take care of him and give him an oil bath and give him a purpose. So it's, sort of a core astromech. And it sounds like he sort of went through like a memory wipe at some point. So we're kind of looking at like bare bones programming.
Yeah.
And he sort of, we get a little bit of exposition from him where he's basically like, if I don't get sold to someone on this planet soon, I'm going to cease to function. I've been here for 4 years in the dark and I'm, things are getting bad. And when R2 is brought on to that sandcrawler at the beginning of A New Hope, he sabotages R5 because he sees that there's another astromech. He knows that he needs to be sold so he can fulfill his mission. So when he sees R5, he goes and like basically sabotages his insides in some way, but R5 catches him and they have a little conversation where R2 is like, hey, I am on a mission for the rebellion. Like, I need your help. I need to like fulfill this mission because the galaxy is depending on it. And when he starts talking about the rebellion, R5, it kind of strikes a chord with him and it like triggers something in his memory, which is sort of interesting. And they kind of gloss over it a few times, but it just brought this sort of levity to the character that I really appreciated. And then ultimately, as he's rolling towards Luke, he kind of gets that, like, I have a bad feeling about this. And he ends up blowing his own motivator himself and sabotaging himself so that R2 could be sold to Luke so he could fulfill his mission, because at the end of the day, he realized, you know what? The rebellion is my fight too. So I need to like get in on this fight and do what I can in order to fulfill the original mission that I had at some point. So he sacrifices himself in that sense. His story ultimately ends on a really happy note and a hopeful note. So again, definitely worth revisiting. Check out the audiobook if you hadn't, because it's a great story told that way too. But I love that they take these little like nothing characters and give them this incredibly rich backstory. And that is certainly the case with R5D4.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on every point you said. Not much I can add to that, but certainly great stuff. And yeah, you should definitely listen to the audio book. And, once again, the sacrifices, these are things that get pushed aside, right? Because we spend so much time with the droids that did survive, but we forget about the sacrifices that other people and droids have done in the history of the Star Wars universe for the overall story to continue. And certainly seeing that a droid can analyze the situation, understand what its role is in the situation, and then self-actualize that by deciding for themselves to take their life in essence because of the greater good that needs to be serviced here is pretty powerful stuff. And to have that early on, when you read the history of Star Wars, to read about how that was happening early on is pretty incredible to look at for sure. I know it's been half an hour and it's time to mention someone that Laura mentioned isn't on her list, but is certainly on my list, and that's C-3PO. I know C-3PO, it can be annoying. I know Anthony Daniels loves the spotlight. Nobody does more than he in the Star Wars universe, but you can't deny the power of C-3PO. It is such an essential, such an essential part of the Star Wars universe in so many different media. We've seen him in books. We've seen him on screen. We've seen him animated. We've seen him in the Lego Star Wars stuff. We've seen him throughout on TV, on animated series. He has appeared in so many different places. People have toys. People construct things around C-3PO. We'd be remiss not to mention him. And yes, can he get annoying? Can he get frustrating? Is he scared all the time? Is he always blaming R2-D2 incorrectly? Yes, but his heart seems to always be in the right place, which is, I don't want anybody that I know to die, and I'm scared when you take these chances with your lives, when I look at the odds and it makes no sense to me that you're doing the things that you're doing, because I care about everybody. I want everybody to live. I don't want any conflict, any battles. And look, those of us who are built to have the conflict or to occasionally stand in the arena and have conflict, we kind of look at those people or those droids and be like, oh, how come? Why you need to be angry? You need to step up. And you know what? That balances out those of us who are fighters in the universe. So we need the C-3PO to balance out the other droids in our world or in the Star Wars universe. And I love that about C-3PO. Laura?
Certainly. We've got lots of characters in the original trilogy and in the prequels that are just rushing into battle without hesitation. Anakin certainly comes to mind in the prequels.
Oh yeah.
And we have to have C3PO there to be the balance because he has anxiety. And who doesn't right now,
Right.
And
Yeah.
so he's very relatable in that sense. But the fact that he sort of brings that levity and that balance to every situation that he's in, maybe with the exception of Attack of the Clones, where he's bringing a lot of the humor in that, where his head pops off, and it's a lot of fun with him in the Droid Foundry. But yeah, I love what he brings to the universe in terms of, just always trying to, not really trying to diffuse the tension, I guess, but just try to get a word in every now and then. He's constantly got people shutting him down because they don't want to hear him talk. Or we see Han Solo put his hand over his mouth at one point, and he's a little bit underloved. And I think certainly in The Last Jedi, as much as I love that film, he was underutilized in that film quite a bit. And I think that J.J. Abrams made a real effort to kind of make up for that a little bit in The Rise of Skywalker. And I really love what he did, and when he brought in, the complete redacted memory, whatever that was with Bobby Frick. And having him look around at everybody and hold their hands and saying that he's taking one last look at his friends. And then later he tells R2, or earlier he tells R2 that he's his best friend. There's that great, sort of emotional bookend, I think, for C-3PO in The Rise of Skywalker. Say what you want about that film, C-3PO's arc is great.
You're absolutely right about that. Absolutely right. Any negative feelings you have about that film, you can't deny that they did right by C-3PO. And look, he's he's one of the ultimate survivors. Laura, he has been through all the trilogies, and he is still standing. And he's the one they used when they did that Lego Adventures, Star Wars Adventures. They used C-3PO's retelling of the stories as the vehicle into these tales. If you haven't watched that series, I can't encourage you enough to watch that series. It is so good. And C-3PO has been there for everything. And has found a way to survive constantly. You're right. Sometimes irritating, sometimes comedic fodder, sometimes comic relief, and sometimes absolutely correct when he tells them not to do something. He ends up being right sometimes at critical moments. So he's certainly a droid that deserves a lot of love and respect. And just because he's always been there doesn't mean he shouldn't get his due as well. All right, where are we on to next, Laura?
Why don't we move on to BB-8 next?
Okay.
And I gotta say, I love the BB units, and I love the general concept, because this kind of going back to referencing the Aftermath trilogy, I'm pretty sure that was the book where they reference how BB units are being used as PTSD service droids for people.
Wow.
They're sort of serving as a companion pet for some of the veterans of the war against the Empire, and it's just kind of a really cool little introduction to them. But BB-8 is one of he might be besides the stormtroopers on the ship, BB-8 is the first character that we see on screen in The Force Awakens. So you've got that sort of poetry and rhyming with A New Hope in that sense. But he makes these just the most adorable little sounds. I love BB-8. I have a Christmas sweater with him on it. I've got one there. I've got another one somewhere in here that usually lives at my office, but I've got a lot of BB-8. Oh yeah, there's a lamp. I have a BB-8 lamp. There's a lot of BB-8 energy in my bedroom.
Yeah, I love BB-8 as well. I think he's fantastic. And reading the Star Wars article on these droids, something that was mentioned. Oh, I should mention the author. I apologize for not mentioning her name up till now. Let me bring it up here. I want to be respectful and fair to the great work that she did that inspired this episode. That's Amy Rakow. I hope I'm saying that right, or Amy Rishow. I hope I'm saying that right. But yeah, what she points out is that a lot of people felt that BB-8 was in danger when they saw the trailer of becoming the Jar Jar Binks of the droids. And we've certainly reevaluated that character over time. But I was so glad to see that it wasn't. And I fully expected this to be, it's a cute little droid. They're trying to sell toys or whatever. but actually the droid becomes a really powerful part of that whole trilogy, from the lighter, the connection with Poe Dameron, all of that, and the stuff with Rey. I mean, it really allows Rey to kind of open up a little bit, because remember, Rey rejects BB-8 at first, doesn't want anything to do with, and it's BB-8's charm, BB-8's kind of innocence, for lack of a better term, that kind of wins Rey over, and we've got our new connective tissue to the original trilogy. As you mentioned, the poetic connection that we have here, Luke and R2, and certainly Rey and BB-8, and certainly the uniqueness of the movement of BB-8 as a ball droid was fascinating to watch, and then seeing its personality, or his personality, throughout the trilogy was a joy. And it almost felt like an animated character inside of a live action trilogy, which I thought was a nice change of pace for a droid.
For sure. They were actually able to pull off an animated BB-8 in a couple of scenes, I think, because I remember watching the director commentary, and J.J. Abrams saying, I was supposed to put BB-8 in the scene and I forgot. And so the one that you're seeing right now is a digital BB-8. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
I never would have known. I mean, it looked real enough to me. But I gotta love what BB-8 brings to the sequel trilogy. I do love that there's also this sort of poetic ending where he's the first character we see on screen in the sequel trilogy. He's also in the last scene, standing next to Rey on Tatooine. So there's a little bit of connectivity there too. Absolutely. But he's just great. And the fact that they brought in Ben Schwartz and Bill Hader to sort of inspire, I guess, the noises, or the sort of speaking that BB-8 does, two actors that I totally admire. So that was sort of an added bonus, I think, too. But yeah, you're totally right in the movement. I remember the first time I watched The Force Awakens, I was just like, now how are they doing this?
Yeah.
It was total mystery. And I love getting to see it executed, especially when they're rolling one out at Celebration or something like that.
There's nothing greater than being challenged as a viewer to figure something out scientifically. You're like, how are they making this possible? And I think that's why BB-8 was one of the actual BB-8 units that they were selling was actually one of the biggest selling things they've ever had, because you marveled at the movement. And when you bought one that could move the way it does on screen, you were blown away by the way they were able to make that happen, for sure. Laura, we're running out of time. Should we jump into the granddaddy of them all? Should we jump into R2D2? Is it time? Do you have one? I mean,
we certainly can. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is where we got to go, right? I mean, this is to me the number one droid. Mark Ellis put him, I think, in the number one most essential characters of Star Wars, or biggest heroes of Star Wars, which was a really strong decision by Mark Ellis in his evaluation of the Star Wars universe. He's certainly in my top 10 of great characters, but he is number one in terms of the droid's personality, bravery, intelligence, a way to function in a world where you've got C-3PO constantly making fun of you. It never phases him. It never phases him. He's doing what he needs to do. He's accomplishing what he needs to accomplish. His little screams when he gets electrified, they're so cute and funny. His conversations with Luke, all during Empire Strikes Back and beyond, all of that, he is just such an essential part of the Star Wars universe, and has been there for so many critical steps in fighting against the Empire and the First Order. He has been there through it all, and it's an incredible droid. And remember, if he doesn't send that message to Obi-Wan from Leia, this whole thing doesn't even start. And of course, as you mentioned, poetic connection later in Return of the in the Last Jedi, when he is showing that message, and Luke says, "That's a dirty trick." Just the way he's able to make even the human beings do things, or remind them of things they've done in the past, because once again, the overall mission is bigger than your issues or your human emotions about a situation.
Exactly. And I love the relationship he has with Anakin in the prequels.
Yes.
It's really cute. I mean, even through the Clone Wars, there's great moments between them, and there's also great moments between R2 and Ahsoka throughout that series. So the energy that he brings to those movies, I think, is so fun, because we talked about this earlier. He is sort of dog-like in that he's very loyal. And the noises he makes are great. I do think that I wish he would have been a little bit more in The Force Awakens. It was sort of like unfortunate to me that he was like in low power mode and under a tarp for most of the movie. Kind of made me sad.
Yeah.
That's one of my few complaints about that movie because I mostly really like that movie. But yeah, R2's he's a good one. He's just a good boy. And for some reason he never had his memory wiped, which is just a mystery to me that nobody was like, "Hey, maybe it's dangerous that this guy knows too much." Nobody ever decided that. They were just like, "Nah, he's fine." Because
Yeah.
he's got the whole story. He knows the entire Skywalker saga
That's true.
himself. He could tell us the whole story exactly.
I think the fans would rebel if you tried to mind wipe R2D2 in any form. You can do it to C3PO, but you can't do it to R2D2. People would lose their minds, I believe. Are there any ones we might have missed that we want to toss in here at the end before we wrap up? Laura, anything you want to touch on? Any other droids?
No, I think that covers all of my favorites.
Okay.
This was a fun episode. I do love talking about droids and Star Wars because they're always so fun.
Well, I will throw in the mouse droids. Those are always cute to see whenever they pop up on screen. And of course, for those of you who read the comics and the Dr. Aphra side of things, the 000 droid and the BT1 droids, so great to see. Listen, I'm a pro wrestling guy. I've loved it for years. When the good guy goes bad, when the heel turns, or when the face turns heel, when it's done so well, it is shocking to see. When Andre the Giant went bad, when Hulk Hogan went bad, when any wrestlers go bad, when they were your favorite wrestlers growing up, or you connected to them on a good side of things, it is a devastating experience. But if you're old enough, you also respect it. So seeing this evil, essentially R2D2, an evil C3PO in the Dr. Aphra comics and the Darth Vader comics, rather, it has been a joy to experience their sadism. It's unsettling in many ways, but it's certainly these two droids, if down the road we keep making these live action Star Wars films, and I'm sure they will, and they want to explore new things, I would love to see something like this in a Darth Vader prequel or a Dr. Aphra movie where you bring these droids into live action and see them really kind of mess people's lives up, in my opinion. So
There's
see.
certainly a good compliment for Shelley Aphra.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. She's a great character. I would love to see that live action as well. All right, well, let's wrap up there. Thank you all so much for joining us or for watching this episode of the Jedi Way. It's always fun to have these conversations about what we love about Star Wars, what we enjoy about Star Wars, and it's always great to hear your comments down below as well. Last week, a couple weeks ago, we had that live episode. So many of you all watched. We appreciate it madly. Keep sharing the show. Keep liking the show. As I said, leave your comments down below. All those things help us know what's happening with the people who are watching our show, what their feelings are, and let us know if we missed any droids as well that we should have talked about. We only had a certain amount of time, so we could only get to so many. Laura, thanks again. And where can they find where you're at and all the things that you're doing?
Sure. Come follow me on Twitter. I am at @shutup_Laura. The show that I host with my friend Alice is called Force Toast, a Star Wars happy hour, and new episodes come out every other Tuesday. And I talked about this, I think, in our last episode, but the Blue Bantha Milk Company live stream of Solo 2, an AI story, had to be rescheduled at the last minute. So that's actually happening this Saturday at 5 p.m. Central. So check out the Blue Bantha Milk Company on Twitter, and you can find links to the YouTube video, and you can set yourself a little reminder to come watch that because it is sure to be a grand time. I will be playing the role of Kira and Bib Fortuna. The classic pairing.
Wait. Are you adjusting your voice for Bib Fortuna in any way?
I don't know.
Honestly said, I appreciate that madly.
We'll see.
And shout out to Force Toast Pod. Didn't you guys just celebrate your 2-year anniversary? Am I wrong on that? Or crossing 2,000 subscribers? What did I miss here? I know the 2 was involved.
2 was definitely involved. We hit our 2-year anniversary back in February, but we just crossed the 2,000 followers mark on Twitter. So thank you to everybody who came and found us and followed us just recently.
There you go. There you go. Go and do that, ladies and gentlemen. Go and follow Force Toast Pod. Her and Alice have a great podcast. You want to hear Laura unfiltered? Go and listen to that podcast for sure. All right, that's it. Please follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. Let me know your thoughts. Yeah, tweet me your thoughts about the droids. I love learning more and more about the droids. They're such an essential part of the Star Wars universe. I'm sure all of you agree with that. And please remember to subscribe to the channel down below. Just crossed 16,200 subscribers as we march towards 17,000. 10,000 and 20,000 and beyond. Would love to have you aboard on the Outlaw Nation for sure. And don't forget, we just did all our WandaVision reviews. If you're just catching up on that series, go watch our WandaVision reviews under the Geek Buddies banner with special guest Emma Fife. And if you're just catching up on Mandalorian, go back and watch those reviews with the great Laura Kelly as our guest as well. And we'll be coming back with those Falcon and Winter Soldier reviews starting next week for sure. So get involved with all of it here on the Outlaw Nation. All right, Laura, before we wrap up, what do we have to tell them?
We got to tell them until next time, dear listeners, remember your focus determines your reality.